Yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever or wherever you're watching this from, or when you're going to be seeing this. I welcome you to this episode on Truth That Heals. Um, of course, today there is one thing that has been happening in our country, Nigeria, and which, of course, is generally known globally right now because the world has become a global village. And that's the fact that for a very long time, Nigeria has been battling with the Islamist insurgents and the unabated killings of Muslim, of northern Christians and Muslims alike. And if you are not a resident of Nigeria, of course, if you're in tune with what is happening globally, which everybody should, you would have been hearing about the killings happening in Middle Belt, other parts of the north by Islamist insurgents. And the one question that most people will be asking, one question that will boggle the mind of listeners is the question, is Nigeria at war? Of course, if you ask me that question directly, my answer would be officially no. But technically, yes, Nigeria is at war. Officially, no, because the government of Nigeria has not come forward to accept the fact that Nigeria is currently at war. The government of Nigeria had not found the courage to declare war on the insurgents who had brought war into Nigeria. So officially, no. But technically, yes. Because if you look at the definition of a war and look at the indices and all the parameters of a war, you will agree that Nigeria is neck deep in a serious war that has lasted over a decade. Although the conspiracy of silence and the culture of pretense has not allowed the handlers or the administrators or the government of Nigeria to actually come out to own up to the fact that Nigeria is currently at war. And for that reason, this crisis that has consumed hundreds of thousands of Nigerians continues unabatedly. Of course, if you look at the definition of a war is defined as an organized armed conflict between two groups of people, either within or outside the borders of a country. That is to say that it is not only necessarily between two different countries that a war can happen. A war can equally happen within a country, within the group or segments of a country. But what makes this question even more concerning and more important to answer is the fact that it has been established beyond every doubt that we have mercenaries who are taking advantage of the porosity of our borders, to slip into Nigeria, orchestrate their mayhem, and then also, go away. That is to say that as of today, we have some foreign incursion into Nigeria, and these people, are carrying out mass killing unabatedly in the country of Nigeria against Nigerians. And the government of Nigeria has not found the courage to actually name them for who they are or name the situation that we are currently faced with. Because today, if the government of Nigeria had actually come out to declare war on the insurgents and, declare a state of war in Nigeria, perhaps Nigeria would have gotten, support, from neighboring countries, from global partners and well-meaning organizations across the world. But today, for over 12 to 14 years, Nigerians had been dying in droves, dreams cut short, destinies destroyed for no just cause. It was not until recently when President Donald Trump, about 2 months ago, declared Nigeria as a country of particular concern and threatened, sanctions, and to come into Nigeria guns are blazing, that the government of Nigeria began to show a little sign and concern, as though they understand that the incessant killings, by Islamic insurgents, by different marauders across the northern part of Nigeria was actually, an issue of important, and of concern. But the question is why? As we speak today, since the President of America declared Nigeria as a country of particular concern and declared that a Christian genocide was going on in Nigeria and he was not going to sit back and fold his arms while his Christian brethren, are being persecuted in Nigeria. Since then, Nigerian government and its officials has been doing everything humanly possible and everything within their powers, to counter the narrative that there is no insurgency, there is no Christian genocide happening in Nigeria. But if you look at the situation and the scenarios and things that has been happening, you have no other option than to accept the fact that there has been a Christian genocide, because let us even look at it, objectively. You have, a group of people who call themselves Fulani, militants, who will come in the dead of the night, very organized, well armed, and enter into predominantly Christian communities and then massacre them mercilessly, irrespective of the age or sex of the people. They kill women, men, children mercilessly, and then they go away. We've even had situations that has prompted people to call it a Christian genocide, because a situation whereby community people who had been killed repeatedly will put down their own security measures and intel measures to get information that can probably safeguard them, and then when they get to hear that these people are going to come or they are coming, they will inform security agencies of the information they've gotten, and then instead of the security agencies to act on those information, rather they will accuse the community people of carrying out peddling propaganda that will cause disaffection. And then hours later, just as said, these marauders will come into the community and massacre the people mercilessly. And in some cases, where you have military posts or military settlements that were meant to protect these communities, we've seen situations where few hours the military people and security personnel will excuse themselves, will leave the security post few hours before the attack will happen. And until the attackers are done with their killing and massacre, the military that was supposed to be at those community posts to protect the people will not return. So when things like this continue to happen, of course, it leaves no doubt that there is a conspiracy, a state conspiracy, from the leadership of this country and from the leadership of those who are supposed to protect these people, in collaboration with the people who are killing them. And this thing and more has been happening. Of course, Boko Haram started around 2012. Of course, they had, their labeling in 2012, became very pronounced and recognized globally as a terror organization. But what has Nigeria as a country done decisively since 2012 to actually stamp out this insurgency that has become a menace across our country today? We've had these issues, several times, several administrations have come and they'll keep playing politics, with this, killing that has been going on. But the big question is, why has the state of Nigeria, treated this very serious issue with so much complacency the way they had done? It will also surprise you that so many persons and so many organizations had point accusing fingers, at the government officials of Nigeria, as being complicit, as being sponsors, of what they have called, ethnic cleansing that is going on in parts, of the north. In fact, in 2023, Saudi Arabia, at the end of an extensive investigation about terrorist financing, released an official document containing names of about 15 prominent Nigerians who were fingered, who were discovered to be part of those carrying out terrorist financing in Nigeria and across sub-Saharan Africa and West Africa in particular. And the Saudi Arabian government, through her diplomatic means with Nigeria, sent forward these names to the Nigerian government. And one expected that the government of the day would have, published these names and then taken adequate actions, against these people who had made themselves, the enemy of the state. But what did the government of Nigeria do? The government of Nigeria made that information a classified information and hid it from the views and sight of Nigerians. Until today, as I speak to you, the names and identities of those who were fingered in that terrorist financing, in that very, very extensive investigation that was carried out by Saudi Arabia government, has not been said, has not been made public, has not been punished, has not been even called to question. And then the big question remains, why? Because, of course, no country encourages terrorism. Terrorism is bad in every ramification. Recently, we saw the Nigerian court convicted and sentenced, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, life imprisonment and several other prison terms, for incitement around, the activities that has been happening in the southeastern part of Nigeria. Nnamdi Kanu was even, kidnapped from Kenya via blind baggage to Nigeria, where he was held, since 2015, even up to 2025, for 10 good years. But then, we had instances where you see government officials in picture, in videos, with terrorists who have unleashed nothing but mayhem on innocent Nigerians in the north. We've seen government officials, we've seen senators, we've seen assembly members, we've seen political leaders of various caliber, genuflecting and even, having conviviality with this insurgency. And Nigeria, for one, had not seen it as a problem. So the big question is why? If the Nigerian government is arguing the fact that there is no genocide, because for genocide to exist, there must be state collaboration, and at the same time, Nigerian government officials are seen in different places palling with the insurgents. And not just that, some of the insurgents that had been apprehended in the past had made confessional statements that government officials, governors, senators, people within the presidency are the ones that are funding them. So if these things have been said, names have been mentioned, how many of these names had been brought to book? How many of these names has been called to question? How many of these names has been punished? If you don't do that, then it means that the government is actually aiding and abetting the insurgency that has become a menace today in Nigeria. But of course, because probably, because some of the high and mighty, lives, in glass houses where, they are insulated and protected from, the heat or the ripple effect of this crime. Perhaps that's why they don't, care that much. But of course, it's not just about the fact that they don't care. The Nigerian politicians, the Nigerian leaders, most of them, especially within this particular, political party at the helm of affairs today, being the All Progressive Congress APC, a lot of persons too had come forward to actually accuse them of orchestrating the whole insurgency that has become, a plague to Nigeria today, just for them to get into power. Of course, we had a case where the former president, General Buhari, now late, was accused of bringing in, Islamist fighters, from Libya to the north, where they were camped and given military trainings, to be used, in Libya. And then one way or another, things didn't go the way, that they had planned. And then those militias decided to stay back in Nigeria. And at some point, they decided to now fight back, when they were not getting what they were promised. We've had those issues. It's there in the public domain. We've even had, recently where, someone came up to accuse the current Minister of State for Defense, being His Excellency, former Governor Matawale, of, having a deal with the Islamist insurgents in 2023, funding them, giving them all the backing necessary, and then using them to threaten local community people to vote for the candidate of the All Progressive Congress in the 2023 general election. That accusation is there. Up to this moment, the one that was accused, His Excellency Matawale, is still holding the portfolio that was given to him before that revelation. As we speak today, he's still the Minister of State for Defense. And this is also someone who has, no military background, no history of any military activity or military knowledge, someone whose highest, endeavor in life has been, a classroom teacher, before some way, somehow, he stumbled into politics and became a governor. And today, he's the one that is second in command, save for, the intervention of the American government that made the president to now go and recall back the former chief of defense staff who was compulsorily, retired, to come and serve now as the Minister for Defense. But you want to ask, how does a country that actually wants development, a country that prides itself as the giant of Africa, will stoop so low to the point that for them to play their politics, for them to get by, they have to go, and collaborate with insurgents, militants that they know, number one, is against the global acceptability of leadership or global treaty on peace. They know that these people will bring nothing but destruction. They know that at the end point of this, they cannot come out boldly to associate themselves, with these people, but they brought them in because of their own selfish consideration. And this country will claim that they are not enablers of the genocide that has been happening in Nigeria. Of course, they've been arguing, doing a whole lot of things to try to see how they can launder their image, that, there's no genocide going on in Nigeria. But how can you tell anybody who had been a victim of the Islamics, attack in Plateau State or in Benue State today that there is no Christian genocide? How can you tell such a person that when they have not seen any genuine effort, from the government in trying to save them? In fact, for the most part, they have, been accusation or indications, that these people are enabled, by the government. And the government has been enabling these people in so many ways. As of today, it is clear that several governments in the north, even the federal government, at one point or another, has been paying ransom to these militias when they kidnap people. They've been paying ransom in trying to pacify them, not to carry out their attack. But what that means, invariably, is that you are financing the terrorists. Because when you give these people money, not to carry out that act, they now see that, okay, if they did, this crime today, they killed maybe 100 people today, we are able to get $1 billion from the government officials. They will now realize that tomorrow, maybe perhaps if we kill 200 or 500, we can get more. And then this spate of violence continues. The government continues to inadvertently sponsor them, because that is what has been happening. The government of Nigeria has been inadvertently, sponsoring and encouraging the insurgency that has been happening in Nigeria, and that's the fact. That is the reason why denying that there is no genocide in Nigeria is one of the most odious duties that Nigeria can ever do. No matter the amount of influencers, no matter the amount of image launderers, no matter the amount, of spokesperson, that the government will want to hire to try to, counter that narrative, it's going to be very difficult, because the evidence abounds all over the place that one way or another, in the actions and inactions of our government, they had inadvertently been supporting these insurgents to carry out the activities and the mayhem that they have been carrying out in Nigeria. And that's the obvious truth. So today, people outside Nigeria, with the narrative and the pictures, the gory images of the killings that has been happening, we want to ask, is Nigeria at war? And the answer is technically yes, even though the government has not officially declared war. Only recently, did we hear, that the government, declared a state of emergency on security, and insecurity. But those are just, mere words of mouth when it's not backed with decisive and sincere action. Today, as we speak, it is in our law prohibited for anybody to pay ransom for kidnapping. But of course, if you look at the insurgency that has been going on in the north, kidnapping happens to be their modus operandi for fundraising, which they in turn use to buy arms, to then use to commit further crime and further killings in the north. But the government at several times had been fingered to be responsible for paying this ransom. In fact, government has sanctioned several ransom payments to these insurgents. State governments have done it, local government has done it, even federal government has done it, under so many pretexts that they were trying to track these insurgents with this money. But we know that the governments are aiding and abetting these people. So when government officials who has been fingered to have been part of this insurgency are now given, important portfolio of government, what then do you think these insurgents will not do? Because right now, they now feel that they are in charge. In fact, the vice president of Nigeria today, His Excellency Kashim Shettima, was said to have been one of those who went to Niger Republic, to Chad, to negotiate for these Islamists, to come in 2014 so that they can use them to cause mayhem, to discredit the administration of the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, and the PDP as a party. That information is there. We've even seen pictures, where he was sitting with some of, the bandits and all of those things. And up to this moment, the government of Nigeria has not been able to ask direct question. Ask these people direct question about their involvement, with these criminals. Rather, what we see is that time after time, they compensate them with bigger portfolio, in government. So, Nigeria is actually at war, although unofficially. But of course, in life, there are different kind of war that people, go through. People engage in states and governments, of various nations go through. But for them to get out of such situation, they have to be honest to themselves. They have to, call it the name that it truly is, not to live in pretense. Of course, today, as we are in Nigeria, we are facing so many battles. Identity crisis, secessionists, all around the place, want to go. And I tell you, I kid you not, today, if you throw it open and make it, free or easy, or do a census for people who want to leave this country called Nigeria, this union called Nigeria, I bet you that every component part of Nigeria will want to secede. Everybody will want to go their separate ways because this union has not worked, has no indication that it's going to work. And a lot of persons, almost everybody, are fed up. If they even throw up, an asylum camp and ask people who want to relocate from Nigeria to come out, I tell you that more than 50% of Nigerians who want to leave this country to even very, very, obscure countries that holds no future in comparison to Nigeria. They want to leave because almost everybody is fed up with this country today. But it's unfortunate. That is our reality. And these are the difficult truths that people don't want to say because some way, somehow, the country of Nigeria has, made it an offense or a crime such that when you say the truth the way they are, they first of all label you that you're demarketing the country, you're trying to destroy the country and all of that, and then you become a target. We've had issues where people who came up, to attack or to confront or to speak about the inadequacies or excesses of government were disappeared. As we speak today, the issue of Dadiyata of Kaduna State is still one unresolved issue that several civil society organizations has been asking what happened to Dadiyata, a young man who was criticizing the ineffectiveness and the complicity of government in the atrocities that was going on in the north. Suddenly one day left home and never came back up to this moment, and nothing has happened. And there are several cases like that. There are several Nigerians, in detention facilities held because they made, they took a bold stand to make, to make, statements that was unpleasing to the state of Nigeria about the inadequacies of government. So when is that going to end? So of course, we'll keep on talking, keep on letting the world to know what is happening in Nigeria because, of course, like they say, corruption buried in secret destroys a nation, but truth elevates, truth motivates, and above all, truth heals. So we'll continue talking until, I come across your way again next time with another very important issue that borders, on the welfare of Nigerians. Of course, I'll keep it real, never sugarcoating it, saying it the way it is, because I believe that the more we are informed, the more we can take a more informed and decisive action that will make us, continue to demand a better governance and better, deal, from our government for them to do what they were supposed to do. Thank you so much, and God bless you. I remain Comrade Solomon Lenu. I come your way again next time. God bless you.